So in this video, we're going to talk candidly about why we're here and what our intention and purpose behind this group is. And so I think, unless you feel differently, Andrea, we can probably begin where we first met. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. So Shawn and I have been in this program where we're both transformational coaches. We have different modalities and different ways of working, of course, but we met in a group about how to magnetize new clients. And I've been feeling this for many years, actually, Shawn. I've been feeling this desire to create a program around restoring balance to the masculine and feminine. And there was something about you that drew me to you as a person to connect. Your energy, you have a really deep energy and very earthy energy, how I perceive it. And I thought, and then we met on Zoom, we discussed it and discovered that you also have an interest in this subject. And I'm really excited that we're working on this together.
Yeah, I'd agree. There's a fine selection of people out there that I can really connect with, and I found that your energy was very similar to that spectrum of individuals that I'm attracted to. When I found you, I was very intrigued by the receptivity and the structure that you had brought. And that indicated to me that that balance that I've sought so much in my daily life in almost every decision I make was present with you. So that was definitely magnetic, and drew me to you as well. So I think that's just where we began, was within that program, and that's how we established our relationship. And I think ever since then, it has really kind of grown into a reciprocative relationship of receiving and providing, giving and taking, that was very fulfilling for me. So
Yeah, and one of the things I really appreciated about getting to know you is Shawn and I set the intention that we agreed that we would share modalities and that we took time in the beginning to get to know each other, learn about each other, and we shared modalities with each other. And so I got to experience how you work, Shawn, and that was so powerful for me. It was just such a huge shift for me. And I really feel honored to work with you and walk with you on this path of developing this program in this community.
yeah, I think that's, well, I know that that is really what expands consciousness, right? Is experience. For one to find resonance with their truth, for the most part, experience is what defines it for each individual. And so that's really what helped me as well. Once I was able to step into a realm where I was able to trust somebody else's guidance for visualization, which is a very powerful architectural energy for creating reality, it really was a liberating thing for myself as someone who responds powerfully to somebody else. I found that that was something that I was able to do with you very, very quickly. And with some of the work you'd done with me from your standpoint, that was also very supportive for me in this particular aspect.
I've been thinking about this theme for like probably a decade. How about you? Is this something that's been on your mind and your soul has been calling you to step into this as a leader, guide, mentor, coach?
For the last 35 plus years, it's been a simmering underlying aspect of who I am. It's been a very powerful drive for me. When I first came into awareness beyond my age, about age 6 or 7, uh, I didn't understand the drives that I experienced. I just knew what they were calling me to do, which was aspects of unconditional compassion, understanding, and support. And so, just to kind of truncate, the last 35 plus years, sitting back and listening to the CBS News or any other world news when I was that young really tilted me. It really threw me off balance. I could see and feel the disharmony and the suffering in the world. And it took many, many years for my mother and I to understand what was going on. Um, and we still didn't fully understand why, but we understood that seeing that kind of disharmony and discordance in the world really, really caused me a lot of pain personally. And so, from a very intuitive, supportive, and compassionate, and interest in pursuit of balance aspect of who I was, it drove me for many, many, many years from an unseen side of who I was. So, um, to say the least, with or without my awareness, it's been a driving factor for me for many decades.
Mm. Yeah, it's been even, I was thinking, even there was in my own development, there was a time in my life where I used to model, I was a fashion model, and I had long hair, and it was the flip, whatever, Farrah Fawcett was in style. And so, the hair had to be perfect and everything. And I've always been a spiritual person. I've always been interested in uh, deeper understanding, psychology, and and I really didn't understand this, like, you men go to work and men mow the lawn and women cook, and like I didn't like how these roles were so limited. And I feel myself more as, I would say, an androgynous being. I I feel like I'm a six planet Aquarian, so I with Sag rising and Pisces moon, so I feel my whole life has been this awareness of, okay, what are the genders, what are the energies? And there was a period in my life where I was in Vancouver, and we were, going to this beach, a nude beach, right? And and it was interesting because I thought, when nobody's wearing clothing, there's something that fades away in terms of polarity or duality. We just all look like human beings. And I started understanding that we were, masculine and feminine. This is probably when I was, in my early 30s. I was thinking about these things. And prior to that, I was talking about the hair, and I started feeling like I was just seen as, I felt like people were projecting onto me what a woman is. And I just wanted to be seen as a soul. I didn't want to be seen as like a Breck. I used to think I'm like a Breck girl. Like, the Breck is a shampoo that was popular in the 70s and 80s. And I felt like people only saw me as one dimensional, as a female that was attractive and, had the hair, had dressed up, whatever, was a model. So what I did is it was like I took a bowl and put it on my head, and I cut my hair really, really short because I didn't want to be identified as just a female. I wanted to be seen as a soul. And this was like I was about 22 years old. I'm 63 now. So when I was 22 in university, I cut my hair really short. And Shawn, I would get kicked out of bars because the bouncers would say that I'm a butch, or so I remember getting physically pushed out of a bar by a bouncer because he said, "We don't want your type here." I wasn't a lesbian. I was exploring my sexuality, and I delved into it a little bit, exploring what that, my attraction to women, the energy, the feeling, but I was not a lesbian or a butch, but even if I was, I shouldn't have gotten kicked out of the bar. But what it really showed me was how much is based on projection, what they project on you can really impact you.
Right. Uh, the ideologies, even just 30 to 40 years ago, have changed so much in regards to the energies that we see now. and and even though we're still moving through a powerful space whereby an individual's experience is bringing them opportunity for more balance internally, the there's an interesting split occurring between those who are not aware of this emerging balancing force and those who are riding that wave through. I've I can relate to what you're saying. In my own way, it was a lot of feeling like an outcast because I had this insight to the
Mhm.
very structured and creative side that the masculinity could bring, as well as the compassionate, intuitive, and receptive side that the feminine energy could bring. And back then, there was a lot of safety and security concerns as far as feeling and expressing vulnerability in the feminine aspects, especially, growing up as a eldest of three who are all boys, and then pretty much having friends and social circles and other similar interactions that were defined by the masculine dominance. There was a lot of vulnerability that would have to come with being me, being authentic and true to who I was. And if there was any sense of vulnerability that was detected in expressing compassion and insight and support and receiving any kind of um, compassion from others, not just showing it but receiving it, that would often be misinterpreted as an opportunity to exploit or manipulate, as somebody who is weak. That also is what drew me to stand up for the justice and balance that really was prominent in my life. So there was a lot of conflict in my life, to say the least. I stuck up for a lot of people. I was the target by a lot of people because I was able to, even though I was on some level avoiding exhibiting that vulnerability, I was still unconsciously acquiescing to it. I was still sticking up for people who were victimized by those who were overly masculine in energy and perceiving the feminine energy in somebody, or who saw it as a vulnerable aspect to exploit. And so uh, it's been an interesting journey to watch how the world has begun to relegate decisions to insight and empathy over the last few decades. But like I said, in saying that, it become more and more polarized as well. Watching that old paradigm, that old energy grain try and reinforce its presence through domination of old patterns and old structures that are falling away. And so, um, yes, it's been a very polarized and interesting observation to witness as an observer in my energetic form. Um, I pick up on a lot of cues, and it's been interesting to watch individuals and collectives both move through this similar energy that we both have spoken to.
I feel that because we're all in this period right now, this major shift that we're going through of rising consciousness, but there's still the old paradigm that's trying to cling on to power and cling on to their relevance. And yet, so there is a split in conscious, like it's really interesting how divided it is. At
Mm-hmm.
the same time, like I remember speaking to a man and he was like saying, yeah, it's like so much duality and polarity. And I said, well, there is that, but where do you want to set your focus? You can focus on the duality or you can focus on the unity. And if you focus on the unity, it's not as upsetting to your emotional well health, right? Well-being. I think it's really interesting that we're living at a time, because I was exploring my gender. Like I said, I explored my sexuality with other women. And now there's a lot of, youth that is transgender. And so what's, I think we're transcending beyond gender. And I think there's a reason these souls are going through this transgender process. Also, I think sometimes there's social pressure that maybe impacts young people that maybe shouldn't, change. I'm just observing it from an equanimous point of view that rather than judging it, just looking at it with interest, like, this is interesting. We're going through this period right now where the genders are merging. And, it's common for me. I live in New York, so I often see, men wearing skirts or makeup. And it's I find it interesting that we're merging these together and it's triggering a lot of people, but I think there's also a lot of healing that needs to happen. And I know working with you, Shawn, and also the work I do, we we're able to help people in this healing process to integrate the masculine and the feminine. And so I think that we really are on a path of healing. And I have another thought about something that just came up, but just before I go on, did you want to say anything about transgender movement or anything about that before I think talk about this other thing I was going to say?
It's interesting how the flows of subtle energy emerge into the surface expressions that we experience with in our relationships and within ourselves in tangible or concrete form. I find that rather than it being rather than these transformations emerging through old structures of expectation and pattern, their definition is morphing more by principle and inner guidance it's more dynamic and doesn't have a specific flow or structure. And in fact, each individual that embraces the inner truth that they're guided by, which has a flow between the masculine and feminine energies, uh, changes the model by which society defines itself by each individual that does this. And so, these virtues and principles, unity, coherence, alignment, that it's just like time. It's not set. One person can experience the flow of time completely differently than another person right next to them in the same room. So these guiding principles and these virtues that defines a person's path are no longer so strictly expected to adhere to a structure of old patterning. And that's allowing them, the individuals and the energies themselves, to liberate themselves, collectively contributing to the whole in ways that, although some may see as triggering, are opportunities for reconciling these old structures that are struggling to maintain presence in the individual's life as well as the collective energy that we see amongst the world in society, geopolitical, religious, almost, no aspect is without effect. And so, yeah, we're starting to see the embodiment of the dynamic flow, the dynamic nature of these energies emerging more and more tangibly into our individual and collective lives. It's very interesting.
I love what you said because I feel excited about it because I think we're entering a time when it's okay. Like if you want to dress like a man one day or dress like a woman, like feel free, be yourself, you know? I mean, it just made me think of I went to a party with a group of women and we were like 10 of us, we're having a raucous time and we were saying, I wonder like what a man would think listening to us and we were kind of imagining a man observing us. And then I just, I'm an actress. I like to dress in costumes. I like to channel different characters. So just for fun, we were playing with wigs. We had a bunch of wigs. And I just thought it'd be fun to put on a mustache. So I drew a mustache on my upper lip. And, and then every other woman put on a mustache. And then we kind of embodied more masculine. And I think I pretended that my friend whose birthday it was, that I was her boyfriend. And, and then it was just so much fun to have that fluidity between both genders and explore. And I think that's where we're moving is just, not to be seen in these limited boxes of this is what a man does, this is what a woman does. We're both masculine and feminine. And I think there's a lot of evolution going on with our perception of what that means and how we can express that.
Right. Yeah. I believe that. Well, I know that what I observe is that what's been repressed by way of old structures establishing their dominance over the way that our behaviors are expected to adhere to norms is now surfacing because script is getting flipped on its head. Where at one point, self martyrdom for the well being of others was the norm, although there's not saying that there's not value in that. We're now starting to see that it isn't exclusively this or that, with the idea that self care coming first doesn't have value or compromises that. And so now to recognize the self and recognize what we prefer or desire in regards to experience or expression is now establishing its own space. And it isn't seen as a so much as a competitor or a challenge to self-sacrifice for the collective good anymore, because we can see that now that, for example, the depth to which you can love yourself also defines the depth to which you can love others. The transparency to which you practice with yourself is the transparency to which you can practice with others. And where at one point we may have been too afraid or anxious to express what we had and felt inside, and unknowingly compromising the energies we contributed to the collective, we're seeing now that when we honor what we have within, we also are reflecting outwardly into the equivalently into the collective. And so those expressions, although considered a threat to some or an imbalancing aspect to some, typically are actually representations of the depth of compassion and consideration and vulnerability they're willing to express to the others, strangers or familiar alike. So yes, to explore with flow and grace the inner guidance, whatever it is you choose to experience with regard to the well-being of yourself and the collective, not compromising one for the other, is what I see emerging very prominently.
It makes me think of I attended a conference called the Sacred Water Gathering where I showed my documentary film. It was for Indigenous people, and well, everybody was welcome, but most of the speakers were Indigenous. And there was some Indigenous people from Colombia. They're called the Kogi, or they call themselves the people of the earth. But it was a documentary film about they their shamans are able to see what's happening in our world. They can hear news. They're so intuitively awakened that they can perceive what's going on, and they call us little brother and little sister because we are, this culture, Western culture is very patriarchal, and we've lost our connection to Mother Earth. It's just become a place to get resources from. And there's been no respect to our living conscious Gaia. And, the planet is alive, water's alive, tree, everything is alive, everything's energy. And what really impacted me was when one of the people stood on the stage and said, the problem with, I can't remember exactly how he said it, but it was like the problem with the imbalance that we're having right now, the disconnection from Mother Earth, the pollution, the wars, all the destruction of the water and the land and everything, has the root cause of this, he said, was the balance between the masculine and feminine. And he also said the sexuality between masculine and feminine, because sexuality in our culture has become, it's really very kind of pornographic. Like there's not a lot of talk about sacred love, sacred connection, that you exchange energy when you make love, or, it's so the respect has just become like there's a whole, rise in the toxic masculine that sees women as subservient and just to be used, to have sex with, and to, do whatever they want them to do. And they don't want women to have power. And yet, if they did the healing to soften their hearts, they would realize that they've also been deeply wounded by the patriarchy. And as men heal their inner feminine, and well, we can be healed. wounded in the masculine and the feminine through our mother and father, right? And so, imagine a world where men and women we trust each other and we can be soft and we can also lead. Like I'm not threatening to you if I'm leading, and you're not threatening to me if you show it, or I don't perceive you as weak or, not a man if you share emotion and tears and vulnerability. And I think that I grew up, in the 80s, right, where it was like women would wear, shoulder pads, and it was expected for women to wear business suits and behave like a man to get what they wanted because the masculine was dominating, and women felt like to compete, they had to become like men. And I think that's been so damaging because just as the masculine has wounded the feminine with this over dominance, and control and everything, women have also uh, wounded men by becoming like men instead of being in their feminine.
Yeah, the rebalancing of the two energies is a really, really important aspect to living in harmony with one's truth in the dynamics that it represents or presents itself by way of the internal reality the person interprets and experiences and makes choices from, as well as how they interrelate with others externally in their reality in regards to the gender. And the the flow of energy between two individuals in the way that they embody the energies internally really makes a difference in the way that their relationship's integrity is established, the value and the longevity, the joy and excitement that comes through. And so, going back to relationships just for a quick second, I've had a long-standing view on relationships. They're very, very sacred to me. They're very important, and I don't choose them without consideration that comes from within. But generally speaking, I have two models of relationships that I engage in. There's um, sacred and mutual, and mutual is they're both through consent, and I think that I know that all relationships must come to fruition through consent, because without consent, inner alignment derived from one's truth, there will be imbalance, and that inner truth is derived from the balance of their embodied feminine and masculinity. And so, as the relationship is cultivated into a stronger and healthier version, it can graduate into a more powerful form of a sacred relationship where we can have children, we can create life. It isn't just about two people living and cohabitating in what I consider that mutual union. You can transform reality by creating life. And so, I mean, when we look at the value and the implications of how we make our decisions on embodying the two energies and how they implicate into the interrelative aspects of two individuals, it's the foundation on which this entire world shifts for generations and generations. It's just a series of decisions, but it's one decision at a time that we make, and they're all equivalently important. And so, yes, I completely agree that each individual's path, although unique to each individual, has to be navigated from within with regards to the balancing of those energies that reciprocates into the relationships of every individual that they have in their life, and those to come through any other sacred union that they might create life through.
Well said. I love that. I agree. Well, Shawn, I know we can talk on and on about this. There's so much to cover. But I feel that this is like a good overview of why we started this group and what our intention is. And um, there's what we hope with this community is that we have these discussions where Shawn and I are talking about having like a monthly circle or a monthly talk or a monthly class focusing on different aspects of healing and balancing the masculine and feminine. And we want to have a podcast as well and bring guests on to talk about these subjects. It's fascinating, and I think it's a really important um, phase of our evolution to really start having these conversations because, I'm separated, so I don't have a lot of male friends. I used to when I was single. I had more male friends, but that was in my 30s, and now I'm not the same as when I was in my 30s. And I really I'm looking forward to having conversations to understand each other and to hold each other through this process of healing and rebalancing.
Yeah, I think this is a very pervasive aspect to a lot of people's lives out there. And I know that there are some out there that have found balance within some of their relationships whereby they can be vulnerable and explore this topic without condemnation or exploitation. But those are typically within guarded spaces. And the more we bring this out into ubiquitous space, into social and public spaces, the more this will normalize, the more that individuals would become more open and receptive to understanding what it's like to walk a mile in an individual's shoes without the old patterns of judgment or projection or exploitation really dominating these spaces. And so I agree, and I'm looking very much forward to exploring in different discussions and podcasts these topics.
So thanks everybody for joining us, and stay tuned for more. Shawn and I are going to have more discussions, and we're going to open up the space to create, safe spaces for everyone to have these conversations. So blessings to all, and we look forward to meeting you.